Hey everyone, good morning, and thank you for tuning in for today's webinar. Our topic for today is see the whole picture, adding product analytics to feature gates and experiments. I'm Sid from the product marketing team at Statsig, and today's presenter is Akin, our PM, who I'll have him introduce himself in just a moment. But as people trickle in, let me just get a couple of quick housekeeping items out of the way. We'll be recording the session, so we'll send this across to you within a few days so you can share it with some of your colleagues if you need. We're also setting aside about 15 minutes at the end of today's presentation, which will last maybe for about 25 minutes or so for Q&A. So please keep your questions coming throughout the webinar. You can use the Q&A panel on the Zoom to submit your questions. We'll try to answer them either right away or save the ones that we can't get to for the very end. But yeah, hopefully this will be an engaging session. So keep participating throughout the session. The goal for today's webinar is twofold. First is we want to give you an introduction to why Statsig has been building product analytics and how it fits in with the rest of our platform, specifically how it works seamlessly with our feature gates and experiments. And the second goal of today's session is to give you a glimpse into how product analytics looks like within Statsig. Some of you might already be Statsig customers or using Statsig for feature rollouts or running A/B tests. So we want to also give you takeaways that you can uh, go back and try in your companies after the webinar, right? Like quick wins that you can achieve. If you're already using gates and experiments, being able to add product analytics very seamlessly to that. So to get started, Akin, can you give us a quick intro about your background and your role at Statsig?
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Really excited to be here. My name is Akin. I'm a product manager here, as Sid mentioned, and I've been working on product analytics here at Statsig for about the last year and a quarter or so. It's been really exciting to see us go from zero to kind of one of the best product analytics offering in the market in that short amount of time. Before that, I've worked at a range of big tech and startups. I was at a startup right before this, and before that, I spent many years at Facebook working on kind of developer productivity tooling. And before that, I spent many years at Microsoft working on Microsoft Teams and the Windows kernel.
Nice. So Akin, you just alluded to, launching product analytics since you joined last year. For folks in the audience, we released product analytics earlier this year. I think it was in March. And like Akin said, it's grown so much and, it's become on par with some of the other tools that are out there in the market, which have been there for many years. But Akin, to get things started, can you just help us, set the stage and give us some context into why Statsig built product analytics in the first place? A lot of people obviously know Statsig as, a leading feature flagging and experimentation tool. But can you talk a bit about like how product analytics fits into this vision?
Yeah, so historically, Statsig, or actually, let's start with thinking about the mission of Statsig, right? So Statsig's mission is to really help teams build and ship more successful products, right? And I think that is our general North Star. And the way we've been aiming to achieve this is by helping teams make better product decisions and also helping teams execute faster, right? And when you have teams that excel at both, like making the right product decisions and shipping them efficiently, they create better products at a pace that compounds over time. And it's that like compounding that really kind of like has helped teams that leverage Statsig be more successful in the long term. And if we break down kind of like those two parts, right? So quicker execution and better product decisions. That fast execution right now comes in the forms of products that we offer, like feature flags and dynamic configs. And they allow you to be really nimble and safe in how you get changes out to your users. So you can do things like ship on a Friday and not really worry about it. And the kind of better product decisions part has historically been experimentation, right? And we're kind of very clearly like best in class here, right? Uh, you are able to kind of like test the changes that you want to make before you ship them and understand the impact that they're going to have, and then kind of safely roll them out with um, our feature gates. Um, the and like using experimentation is a really, really useful, powerful way to go and make these better product decisions. But experiments are useful after you've already decided what to test, right? And if you've ever worked in product development, you know that like figuring out what to build in the first place is half of the struggle, right? And we want to help you make really great product decisions throughout the entire product life cycle, right? So before like you're trying to just like figure out like, hey, how are users using my product? What features are helping them be sticky users? What features make them really deeply engaged? So you can, and figuring out like the areas where those things aren't happening. So you can focus your energy on those places and then kind of help you figure out the things that you actually want to go and test through experimentation. And then once you've kind of made those product decisions after you've done experimentation, it's really useful to also be able to track their long-term impact, right? What happened after you launched that thing, and then just generally track how engagement, retention, conversion are trending for your product and your product features. So just to kind of summarize, we think that like making better product decisions and combining that with really great execution is how you have this compounding effect of shipping better products and more successful products. And we want to help you make really good product decisions throughout the product development lifecycle. And I think that's why we want to pair things like product analytics with experimentation.
Nice. So, I mean, historically, I guess to make these decisions at different stages of the product development cycle meant that companies would use multiple tools to make this happen, right? Like often when I do customer stories and I'm like, documenting, the success of our customers, like for case studies, they often tell me that, oh, previously we were using maybe an optimizedly, maybe a launch darkly and a full story and a mix panel or an amplitude. So what you described essentially I guess traditionally required like having three or four different tools. So can you talk a bit about like how that is changing now with Statsig? Like, were there like what were the main drawbacks of that legacy approach of like having different point solutions, trying to string them together, often building some internal platforms as well to like make that happen? Okay, can you talk a bit about what Statsig's sort of
Yeah.
modern approach is for that?
Yeah, so I used to be at one of those companies that kind of took like an Optimizely, a Launch Darkly, a log rocket, and like an amplitude, and thought, okay, like now we can make really great product decisions and data-driven product decisions, right? And I think what you realize quickly is that there are naturally occurring limits to what you can achieve when all of these kind of like decision making like or all these products that help you with making decisions don't really know how to talk to each other and often live off different data sets and yeah and you kind of just like hit those limits quickly, right? So like the benefits that you can accrue from each of them like is really siloed to the surface area that they like help you with and the points of friction between them like kind of reveals a big chasm, right? And so some of the obvious drawbacks are kind of like the cost, right? So you're going to be paying, if you have a Optimizely, an Amplitude, a Launch Darkly, and say a Log Rocket, that's four companies that you have to be paying separately on individual contracts to kind of serve like 1/4 of like the whole thing, right? And that can get really expensive really quickly. At my last company, that combination of tools ended up being just like unfathomably expensive, and we just didn't think that it was worth the value that we were paying, right? Secondly, there's kind of just like operational challenges, right? It's really hard to try to convince or have like different functions at your company straddle between the tools. Um, and then just like foster like a culture that like really believes and is bought into these tools when they're disparate, right? So your engineers might kind of really only focus on one tool like Launch Darkly. You might have a data team that only thinks about like Optimizely, a product team that only like really lives in Amplitude, and you're not really benefiting from each of those together. You're benefiting from them in kind of like small chunks, right? Um, and I guess a secondary part of that is like you just kind of have these areas where different functions block on the other function to kind of get the answer, because one tool is for one function, one tool is for the other, and I'm not going to kind of learn this other thing. So I as a PM will maybe block on my data scientist to help me with experimentation, or I as a PM might say, hey, I'm actually not going to touch our feature rollouts, that's only going to be for engineering to touch. And so that the promise and benefit of the nimbleness kind of gets reduced because you're kind of working across all these separate tools. Uh, and I would say the last one is just kind of like data inconsistency, right? So if your source of truth is, say, like a data warehouse, uh, having to manage, there's just the operational aspect of like managing sending data to these different tools, right? And having that be consistent. And then what we found is that there is some error in one pipe and you have to go track that down. And so you're not working with the same source of truth data across all of these. Um, and, and so you have the dual issue of kind of, there is the cost of managing this data and kind of making sure all these like kind of glued together pieces work well together. And then there's also the cost of like not actually having the right data in the right places, and it makes the data that you're making your decisions with a lot less trustworthy if you can't have a single source of truth for that. Yeah, so in summary, it's really expensive, and you're paying a cost that you don't have to, right? You don't need to fund the kind of bank accounts of four companies when you can kind of just like reduce and centralize those costs and benefit from the economies of scales that exist there. There's kind of just the operational challenges and not really being able to trust the data that you're using to make these decisions.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it even at Statsig. Like, obviously, we use Statsig internally. And like, I remember, ironically, when we launched product analytics, and, like, I'm from the marketing team, and, I was involved with like just the launch process. And even we were looking at the same dashboards that our PMs and engineers were all looking at. We were checking how many of our customers were like, activating and checking out product analytics. And there was almost like a shared sense of like everyone's looking at that same dashboard. Like, uh, naturally, as a startup, we have about 100 employees, but like we all self-serve, and we're able to like look at the same data, and we all know what's happening. So I think I've also seen, as someone who's not even from the PM or engineering space, like it's pretty beneficial for even folks in like biz ops and marketing to have that same access to that same trusted uh, source of truth. So it's interesting that you kind of, I think, Akin, what you were getting to is like, while these four different technologies or tools are like important for that full product development lifecycle, it sounds like it's one of those things where having them together in the same platform is better than the sum of the individual parts, like a 1 + 1 + 1 = 4 kind of situation, where the whole is better than just the individual sums of the parts. So can you talk a bit more about the benefits of what kind of unlocks do we get by having a unified platform for product decisions? And maybe like, that's a good segue for you to also go into after that into the tool to kind of show off use case.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? So um, things like lower costs, right? Like you're going to be paying a significantly lot less money for the same value that or even more value than you would if you kind of like had to pay multiple companies kind of to do these related but different jobs. Second is kind of just like having that really trustworthy source of truth. So that you know that if you're running an experiment and the metric is ticking up some way, you can then go verify that after you launch with the exact same data that you're using to go and make that product decision, right? Um, then there's also just kind of like the velocity in decision making, right? So if I'm going to set up an experiment and I want to go and make sure the experiment's set up correctly, I can just look at the data that I have on my product analytics surface to verify like what I'm seeing is like directionally correct, right? And you're not having to wait uh, and like kind of like multiplex between functions to go and do that. The same person is empowered to kind of do all of that work. Um, and then I think the really cool part is just like the when you have like a unified platform for product decisions, there are just like completely new scenarios that you literally could not do before that arise. And I think that's what really excites me, right? So I think when we started product analytics, the first bit of it was just like, let's make a really great product analytics tool to rival some of the things that are best in class, right? And we've kind of got there now. And the exciting part is that like when you are at a company that is serving experimentation and session replay and feature flags and rollouts and product analytics, all from the same source of data, you kind of get to invent new scenarios that were kind of like pain points before, but finally can be solved in kind of like really cool and interesting ways. So one example of this is kind of like uh, rollouts, right? So when you have one source of truth for your data, and you start to use, say, Statsig for a graduated rollout, we're also the same tool that can be or will be in the future powering your alerts, right? And so you can kind of do this like graduated rollouts that is automatic, right? Rollout to 0.1%, then roll out to 1%, then roll out to 2%. The whole time, we're tracking the effect that rollout is having on a metric, right? Like we are really good at our statistical rigor. I think what we're known for most is experimentation. And so we can like be really precise in telling you exactly what effect that is having on your top line metrics. And then if anything goes wrong, we can automatically roll back that change before it's hit 98, 95, 90% of your users, right? And you would have done no work to go and kind of like get that benefit. And that's the kind of thing that is really hard to do if you have a separate tool managing your alerts and a separate tool managing your uh, your metrics, etc. And then once that thing is rolled back, right? We also have session replays, right? So you can go to a session replay, filter your replays to that specific feature gate, and then watch why that might have been affecting metrics that you care about or engagement, right? And once again, if you had your session replays separate and distinct from your feature management, you couldn't like that scenario just like would be impossible, right? There would be no way to filter your session replay and your analysis and like your debugging to a specific feature rollout that was automatically rolled back because it was affecting some top line metric, right? And that's just like one scenario of many that we were really excited about launching in the future. Some others are kind of like feature impact analysis. You roll out a feature, and we can kind of you can just load up that feature and say, hey, what is the effect of that feature on metric X, Y, or Z, and what is the long-term impact of that feature with holdouts. If you're using product analytics, you can maybe you've defined some interesting cohort with some unique behavior, and you're saying, okay, this cohort that is maybe you're an e-commerce site and you notice that you have a lot of hesitant buyers, right? And you see people adding things to a cart, but not uh, actually purchasing. You can create that cohort in product analytics. You can make that a conditional segment, and then you can run an experiment targeted directly at that cohort that you went and defined through your product analytics exploration, right? And once again, this is something that isn't really possible if you had a separate tool for experimentation and a separate tool managing your cohorts and a separate tool that is enabling you to do that like product analysis. We have a bunch of other ones so that we're kind of experimenting with. So in product analytics, being able to kind of like take a metric and dynamically get pulse results on it, right? If an alert fires, being able to see a time series of that metric with all of the changes that the feature gate changes that may have moved it, right? I think I talked through kind of like being in Metric Explorer, our product analytics surfaces, grouping by an experiment group, and then just watching sessions for that group or filtering to a feature gate rollout or a feature gate group and watching sessions to figure out, okay, maybe this feature isn't impacting your users in the way that you expected. You can verify that through product analytics. Now let's go figure out why with session replays, right? And so these are kind of the things, or just a few examples of things that we're working on or going to launch shortly, and some that are available today that are really powerful and are just not really possible to achieve if you have your kind of like product decision-making stack separated and split between a bunch of different tools. And the best you can do is try to college them together in a way that just like isn't as powerful as using one platform to power that whole experience.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very end to end, right? Like if you were to define a cohort on your, dedicated product analytics tool, like an amplitude, and you say that, hey, I'm defining that hesitant buyers cohort there, but then you want to target that specific cohort, then going into your, feature toggle or feature flagging tool, it just feels very clunky and like hard to like replicate, the exact data, and then be able to measure like how are those variants and control and variant performing on for the experiment that you are running. So these sound really exciting, and I think this is a good segue for showing a little bit to our audience like what these things look like in console.
Yeah.
I think I think we covered most of the material that we wanted to sort of lay that foundation on like how product analytics is fitting into our feature gates and experiments, and how that's unlocking like new scenarios for our existing customers. So Akin, can you like I guess like one final thought I had was just coming to that sort of end-to-end scenario, as a PM for every stage of the product development lifecycle, you probably have specific decisions to be made, right? Like from deciding what to build to then shipping the right feature that impacts metrics to then looking at like long-term trends. Can you, use this framework as a like the basis for like, showing how Statsig helps customers like at every stage of that journey?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, should we just hop into a demo so we can kind of
Yeah.
look at the product? And yeah, sweet. Cool. Can you all see my screen well? So
Yeah.
yeah, so just in case you're not familiar with Statsig product analytics, what I'll do first is kind of give you a quick understanding of how it works, right? So the way that Statsig product analytics is set up to work, along with session replay, is to answer specific questions that you might have and to answer specific types of questions with specific types of charts, right? So to answer kind of trend questions, how is my engagement trending? How are users using our product over time? We come up with kind of like the metric drill down view. And here you can see we have purchase events and the average value of purchase events over time split out by country. Next, an important question that people often need to answer is how are people converting through kind of the valuable workflows throughout your product, right? And so this is best answered by a funnel. And I'll kind of get into some of the things that we can do with funnels as well. Next is kind of retention, right? How are people being retained in my product? And this is best answered by retention charts, right? So sorry, give me 1 second. So we can see here the different retention people have from landing on the site to actually doing a purchase event. And then there are kind of more open-ended questions that we often have, right? So it's very often that you're not actually, you don't have these like key workflows defined yet, like you would need for a funnel. And instead, what you want to do is understand, okay, how do people get to a key part of my product journey, right? So we have a product view and we are seeing the paths that people take to get there. And or you can answer the question, where do people go from a spot in my product journey afterwards, right? And so we can see we've kind of gone 3 steps down this path. And then we get into kind of more niche questions, right? So one thing that we often see is that we have a good sense of kind of the absolute value of some metric, right? So we know that the average purchase value is, or yeah, the average purchase value for something might be N dollars, right? But it's harder to get a breakdown of what that distribution is like, right? So do you have like outliers or power users that are really affecting the average, or is it evenly distributed, right? And so we built the distribution view, and we're actually kind of overhauling this right now to help answer questions like how frequently are people doing some event? What is the breakdown of some event property value, and how's that distributed? And then lastly, for some metric that you've gone and defined elsewhere in Statsig, maybe using for experimentation, how does that metric value break down? So you can get a full distribution view of that. And then last is a feature that we have in beta called session replays. And this is really useful in understanding, like, one, scoping your like blast radius to a specific spot, right? Through filters that we have, such as user ID, user email, feature gate, or experiment, or even kind of like the duration of replays. And then lastly, kind of really understanding why an event is happening instead of just being stuck with the numbers, right? So getting that qualitative signal in addition to that quantitative signal. First, I'll hop into funnels, right? And here we have a kind of a funnel that is defined as starting at the landing page and then ending with a purchase event. And what you can see is we're not actually, and you can break down funnels in a lot of ways, right? So you can break it down by event property, user property, and experiments or gates. Traditional product analytics tools are really good at letting you break it down by, say, a user and event property. But in Statsig, because we are one unified platform, you could also ask questions like, okay, what's the breakdown in conversion rate for people who have some feature and people who don't have that same feature, right? And that's what you see here. in this funnel, we have a new search algorithm in our product, our demo product, and you can see actually there is some like a 10% difference in the total conversion rate between people who don't have the new feature gate or the new search algorithm and people who do, right? So the people who do convert at 1% and the people who don't convert at 0.94%. And that's just one thing that you can do when you have these tools kind of all together. If we get rid of that gate, you can also see that you can look at funnels in different ways, right? So in addition to the conversion rate, you're actually able to see it as a time to convert, right? So answering the question instead of just how are people converting, you can answer the question, how long is it taking people to convert through the product? And this is really interesting when you have key workflows that you want to happen either very quickly or very slowly, or you're just interested in understanding how long it's taking them to occur. And the last view that we have in funnels is the conversion rate over time. And this is really useful if you launch a change that you expect to change your conversion rate, and you want to verify that that's actually occurring, being able to look at the change in conversion rate over time is a really powerful way of doing that. So you can imagine that you launch a new feature, and you launch it on the November 17th. If you expected it to change your conversion rate in general, this would be a great way of seeing that trend over time. And once again, you can group this by event or user property, but also experimental gates. So if we go back to that new search algorithm, you can see that the conversion rate over time for folks who have this new search algorithm kind of diverges from the folks who don't. Next, we'll go into our retention charts, right? And you kind of can paint that same picture here, where you can obviously compare different events or compare retention by event property or user property. We could also compare retention rates by feature gates or experiments. And once again, we see that folks with the new kind of search algorithm are converting or are retaining at a higher rate over time than folks without it. And in the retention chart, you can obviously change your retention granularity. So we have access to understand your daily retention, your weekly retention, or your monthly retention. You can change that time period that you're looking over. And then also you have the ability to filter your analysis to a specific cohort of people that you've defined or compare how different cohorts are behaving. I kind of went over user journeys and distributions. And last, I'll go into the drill down chart. And the drill down chart is kind of where I spend most of my time. And this is really great in understanding different trends over time, right? And so we can see, and you can kind of configure this however you want. So the base unit of operation is generally an event. You pick an event like purchase, and let's remove the group by. And let's change this to just be a line chart. And you can change how you're kind of aggregating this event, right? So you can start with maybe just a count of how many times this event happened. And then also look at things like how many daily active people did this event. What is the sum of some property value of this event? What is the average of some property value of the event? Or what is the percentile breakdown of some property or the event? So we can find something like the P95 purchase value of this event. You can also compare how this looks across different user properties. So things like country, and you have access to a lot of different views, right? So we have stacked line charts, which are great for kind of understanding the total amount each group takes of the total, but also things like stacked bar charts that give you different ways to visualize it. Horizontal bar charts, actually event samples, and then single value views, which are also great for kind of like putting these big and bold on a dashboard to understand the actual impact at a quick glance. And then, as I mentioned before, you can also define these cohorts, right? So this is all users, but you can scope to casual users or hesitant buyers. And these cohorts, uh, sorry, power users, right? These cohorts are defined as um, behaviors, right? So you can take a behavior that you think might be interesting. So people who have purchased at least 2 times in the last 30 days, and do your analysis scope to those people, or compare that group against another group, right? So let's say casual users who are folks who maybe purchased exactly once in the last 30 days. And this is just scratching the surface of what you can do with product analytics. We've been working really hard on this product over the last year or so. And I think we've really like nailed some of the kind of like more concrete product analytics specific workflows. And now what we're really excited about doing is unlocking some of those workflows that I talked about before, that kind of like brings the entire platform together and unlocks that value that we chatted about earlier.
Nice. Thanks for walking us through that, Akin. One question we have from our audience from Peggy is how do you define these events, like the purchase event? Could you just give us some context on like how the metric or event definitions in Statsig work?
Yeah. So the way events work is there's kind of 2 options, right? We provide auto capture for some of our most popular SDKs, where all you have to do is kind of put a script or a tag on your website, and we will automatically log a set of events on your behalf. The second way is to integrate with our SDK and send us the actions that you think are interesting that people are doing, right? So you take an SDK like the JavaScript, React, Next.js, Android, iOS, or whatever you want. And we have SDKs for kind of like any language or framework that you can imagine. And then you log the interesting actions as events, right? And so a great way to think of events are interesting things that your users are doing. And a great way to think about user properties are any context that you might want us to know about that action, right? So when you have something like a purchase event, you can look at the different, or maybe let's do this one, product view. Let's break this down by some user properties, and we'll just say, look at the product. Wrong event. Actually, maybe a better way to think about this is, and let's find a better view for that. So horizontal bar charts. Yeah, and now you can see all of the different property values for the product property. And there are a bunch of different properties on this event, right? So we have things like value, country, operating system. All of the context that you want us to understand about that user action are sent over as metadata on that event. And another way to look at this is to look at samples. We have a samples view that allows you to kind of look at actual event logs. So we have things that are the product pink polka dot plate. And you can really look at the individual event logs directly from Metric Explorer, and you can see all the context that was added as part of this event.
Nice.
Yeah.
And folks can keep their questions coming on, on the Zoom Q&A or the chat. We do have another 5 minutes left. If there are any more questions, we're happy to answer those. Akin, did you have any other, scenarios or
Yeah.
you wanted to show?
So yeah, just to kind of give you a kind of a taste of some of the integrations that we're thinking of. For any event that happens, right? One thing that you can do is look at session streams. And this is a great way of understanding kind of what a user journey looks like for at the user level, right? So often when I'm debugging why a thing is happening, it's really interesting to understand, okay, a user started here, they did these events, and you can kind of get this like mental playback of exactly what a user was doing while they were using their product. And you can always click on that any event in this session stream to understand kind of like the full context behind it, like I was describing before. But another thing you can do is for these events, um, you can also just jump to find session replays of that thing happening. And if you did something like group by an experiment or feature gate, when you go to look at those session replays, they will be automatically kind of split out or filtered to that feature gate that you care about, right? So people who did product details um, and are like past the gate for the new search algorithm would be what you see if you click find session replays here. You also if you use the journeys and then look at metric samples as well. And then one thing to emphasize is like these events and these events and metrics are the exact same events and metrics that you use in experimentation. So you're not having to send this data to us twice, and you're not being billed for it twice. You send it to it once. You can go and define those metrics and then use them across all the surfaces, including product analytics, experimentation, feature flags, or even session replay, right? Where you can kind of like say filter to people who did some event and you don't have to send it 4 or 5 times to get all this value. You're just sending it once.
Sweet. I guess we've kind of answered most of what was sent on the chat. I don't see any other pending questions right now. Um, if folks have any, final thoughts or questions, you can send it to us on the chat. We'll be here for a couple more minutes. Uh, but Akin, do you have any, final comments, any hot takes before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I think the really cool thing about what we're doing is we really did do the hard part first, right? Like experimentation, to be best in class at that is really hard work. And we've been able to take those learnings and apply it to things like product analytics, right? We know how to make things work really fast, right? Because we're warehouse native, we have now become a warehouse native company, right? Where things like product analytics work regardless whether or not you are using our cloud implementation or a warehouse native implementation, right? And so having done that like really hard part first, all of these newer products are getting that kind of like acceleration boost in terms of like execution, statistical rigor, kind of like cleanliness of our data pipelines, our kind of like really great SDKs. We've done it for experimentation and now kind of like doing it for product analytics makes it easier for us as a company to kind of go and execute quickly, but also for our customers to integrate and benefit from kind of the entire product stack very easily.
And it's been awesome to just see the velocity of um, how many features have shipped in the last year. Akin, since you joined, like for product analytics, like I know when we launched, I mean, the product looks so much richer than what it was like even just 10 months ago when we launched
Yeah,
product analytics. Like now every chart type has like, the group by, the cohort analysis. There's just way more granularity and flexibility in like how you can display the information. And it feels crazy to think that we announced this product just at the start of the year. So I'm super
yeah,
excited to see like all these you know tighter integrations and workflows come to fruition over the next few weeks and months. And thank you to our attendees for joining us today. We hope you found this session useful. You can use our Slack community, statsig.com/Slack, to get in touch with Akin. Whether you're an existing customer or evaluating Statsig and you have questions around product analytics, Akin's a great resource for you to uh, ask questions and discuss um, with him. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Thanks, Akin, for the demo. And
Of
bye.
course.